It began as an ordinary day inside the gilded walls of Buckingham Palace, but no one could have predicted that a single moment, a cruel remark whispered in passing, would set the stage for a royal scandal so explosive it could unravel fragile family bonds and redraw the lines of loyalty within the House of Windsor. The players in this unfolding drama are familiar: Prince William, the steady heir to the throne; Catherine, the ever-graceful Princess of Wales; and Camilla, the Queen Consort, who has spent decades attempting to navigate her controversial place in royal history. But this time, the conflict isn't about duty or protocol. It's about a child. At the heart of the firestorm is Princess Charlotte, William and Catherine's only daughter, a child adored by her parents and known to the world for her confident wave and poised demeanor despite her young age. But beneath the layers of royal tradition and carefully choreographed appearances lies a truth that even the palace spin doctors couldn't contain. Charlotte overheard something that would forever change her family's relationship with the Queen Consort. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. The incident unfolded during a tense rehearsal for King Charles's coronation, a historic event where every gesture, every bow, and every word was meant to symbolize unity. Behind the scenes, however, emotions were fraying. The children, Charlotte included, had been practicing their roles for days under the watchful eyes of both their parents and the new queen. According to palace insiders, the rehearsal hall was thick with stress, as even the youngest royals were expected to perform flawlessly before millions. And then it happened. In what those present describe as an offhand, cutting remark, Camilla reportedly made a joke about Princess Diana, the woman who once held the heart of Charles and still occupies an almost saint-like place in the minds of the British public. Camilla allegedly said, loud enough for little ears to hear, "Diana's just a ghost that still haunts this family." For Charlotte, who has grown up hearing stories about her late grandmother's compassion and strength, the words struck deep. She idolized Diana, often asking Catherine about her and gazing at the cherished photographs that adorned their Kensington Palace home. To hear her grandmother spoken of in such a cruel and dismissive way, and by someone who now sits on the throne alongside her grandfather, was more than the young princess could bear. Later that evening, Charlotte confided in Catherine, her voice trembling as she recounted what she had overheard. The Princess of Wales listened carefully, her heart sinking with each word. As a mother, her first instinct was to shield her daughter from hurt. But as a senior royal, she was acutely aware of the political powder keg this revelation represented. When Catherine told William, the reaction was immediate and fierce. To him, this was no minor slip of the tongue. It was a direct insult to his late mother, an insult made within earshot of his daughter, who now carried her own piece of that pain. Those close to William say he felt as though history was repeating itself, that the same woman who once contributed to Diana's heartbreak was now inflicting emotional wounds on his child. In the hours that followed, William paced the halls of Adelaide Cottage, torn between rage and sorrow. Memories of his mother flooded back unbidden. Her tears during the darkest days of her marriage, her quiet strength in the face of public humiliation, and the tragic night when he lost her forever. It was all too much. And then came the decision. Swift, decisive, and unlike anything William had done before. He would cut Camilla off completely. No more family gatherings, no more opportunities for her to interact with his children. As far as he was concerned, the Queen Consort had crossed a line that could never be erased. This unprecedented move sent shockwaves through the royal household. For decades, William had maintained a delicate truce with Camilla, out of respect for his father and in service to the crown. But now, that fragile alliance lay in ruins. Palace staff whispered of heated phone calls between William and King Charles, with the monarch caught in an impossible position between his wife and his son. The scandal would not remain hidden for long. Despite frantic efforts by the royal PR machine to contain the story, details began leaking to the press. Tabloid headlines screamed of a royal rift, while social media erupted with fierce debate. Some hailed William as a devoted father protecting his daughter from toxicity. Others accused him of reigniting old wounds and undermining the monarchy's carefully curated image of harmony. But beyond the headlines and the hashtags lies a deeper question. How could a single remark threaten to split the royal family at its core? Was this truly about Charlotte and Diana's memory, or was it the culmination of years of buried resentment finally erupting into public view? As the dust settles, one thing is clear. This isn't just a story about royal protocol or familial disagreements. It's about love, loss, and the unbreakable bond between a father and his child. What happens next could redefine the future of the monarchy. Charlotte had always been different from her brothers. While George bore the quiet weight of future kingship and Louis radiated unrestrained mischief, Charlotte possessed a blend of confidence and curiosity that seemed far beyond her years. Behind palace gates, she was known not only as the one who would sharply correct photographers for mispronouncing her name, but also as the child with a tender, almost sacred fascination for the grandmother she would never meet. In her private world, Princess Diana was more than just the ethereal figure captured in photo albums or grainy documentaries. To Charlotte, she was a heroine, a guardian spirit whose kindness echoed through every story told by her mother. Catherine had made a conscious effort to keep Diana's memory alive, not out of obligation, but from a deep desire to give her children the sense of family history they deserved. Bedtime in Kensington Palace often involved whispered tales about Diana's humanitarian work. Catherine would sit at the edge of Charlotte's bed, her voice soft yet brimming with warmth, recounting how Diana held the hands of sick children in war zones and comforted AIDS patients when others recoiled in fear. Charlotte would listen intently, her eyes wide, her little hands clutching her stuffed animal as if holding on to the connection with her late grandmother. "Mummy, was Granny Diana as kind as you?" Charlotte once asked. "She was even kinder," Catherine replied with a gentle smile, smoothing down her daughter's hair. "She loved people so much, and she would have adored you." These stories became part of Charlotte's moral compass. To her, Diana wasn't simply part of history. She was a symbol of courage and compassion, someone to emulate. It was this innocent reverence that made what happened during the coronation rehearsals all the more devastating. The days leading up to King Charles's coronation were a flurry of activity. For the public, the event was to be a seamless display of royal grandeur and stability. Behind the scenes, however, rehearsals were grueling. Every movement, from Charlotte's curtsy to George's procession duties, was choreographed and practiced until perfection. The children were expected to behave like seasoned courtiers, not like the young souls they truly were. Charlotte, ever the perfectionist, took her role seriously. She had been rehearsing her steps tirelessly, eager to do her part and make her family proud. But the pressure was palpable. In the cavernous hall where staff bustled and royals gathered, the atmosphere was tense. And it was in this simmering environment that Camilla made her fatal mistake. The queen consort had never been comfortable around the younger generation. Though she maintained a cordial front for public events, privately she struggled to connect. Her strained relationship with William and Harry was a legacy she carried like a shadow. And on that day, whether out of frustration, fatigue, or an unguarded moment of arrogance, she allowed words to slip that would ignite a firestorm. "She's just a ghost that still haunts this family," Camilla said in a low, clipped tone to a nearby aide, unaware that Charlotte stood only a few feet away, partially hidden behind a pillar. Charlotte froze. The words pierced her like cold steel. She didn't fully understand the complexities of adult relationships, nor the bitter history between Camilla and the mother she had come to idealize. All she felt was an overwhelming sense of sadness and betrayal. Her big eyes welled up as she turned and quietly walked away, clutching the hem of her rehearsal dress with trembling hands. That evening, as Catherine brushed out Charlotte's hair in their quarters, she noticed her daughter's uncharacteristic silence. "Did something happen today, sweetheart?" Catherine asked softly. Charlotte hesitated before whispering, "Granny Diana." Queen Camilla said, "She's a ghost who haunts us." The brush stopped mid-stroke. Catherine's heart clenched. She could see how deeply the words had hurt her daughter. Rage flickered within her, but she kept her voice calm, determined not to let Charlotte see her own upset. "Darling, you know your Granny Diana was a wonderful person, and nothing anyone says can change that," she reassured, pulling Charlotte into her arms. Later that night, Catherine relayed the story to William, who was sitting in his study, reviewing plans for the coronation. As she spoke, William's face darkened. His hand gripped the edge of the desk so tightly his knuckles whitened. "She said that in front of Charlotte?" he asked, his voice low but quivering with barely contained fury. "Yes," Catherine said. "Our daughter heard every word." The image of his mother, the pain of her untimely death, and years of unresolved resentment toward Camilla surged through him like a tidal wave. For William, this wasn't just about a careless remark. It was about the lingering scars left by a family history riddled with betrayal and heartache. In that moment, William knew he couldn't let this go. This wasn't just about Charlotte. This was about protecting his children from the emotional turmoil that had defined his own upbringing. And for the first time in years, he allowed himself to confront the depth of his resentment toward the woman his father had chosen to stand beside him on the throne. The coronation rehearsals were never meant to feel like a battlefield. Yet as the gilded doors of Westminster Abbey swung open that morning and the royals began filing in, an unmistakable tension hung heavy in the air. It was meant to be a moment of unity, the family coming together in support of King Charles's historic crowning. Instead, beneath the polished surfaces and rehearsed smiles, fault lines were quietly cracking open. Charlotte clung tightly to Catherine's hand as they entered the vast abbey. Her eyes darted nervously across the high vaulted ceilings, the golden fixtures glinting in the morning light. To the world, she was the poised little princess, already carrying herself with more grace than most adults. But inside, her heart was pounding. For days, she had been practicing her steps at Adelaide Cottage, determined to perfect her part in the grand ceremony. Charlotte had always been diligent, eager to get things right. But today, something felt different. Something about the way Camilla had glanced at her earlier, cool and dismissive, left a sour taste in her mouth. It was as if the queen consort's very presence cast a shadow over the preparations. The rehearsal began with King Charles at the center, surrounded by aides and senior royals. Pages moved about, checking scripts, timing cues, and adjusting positions. George, as second in line to the throne, stood stiffly in his ceremonial robes, trying to appear as confident as his father had instructed him to be. Catherine knelt beside Charlotte, adjusting the hem of her dress and whispering encouragement. "Remember, sweetheart, just like we practiced. You're going to do wonderfully," Catherine said softly. Charlotte nodded, her small face tight with concentration. At the far end of the aisle, Camilla hovered with her own attendants. Her expression was pinched, betraying her discomfort despite the air of authority she projected. It wasn't just the rehearsals weighing on her. Rumors had already begun circulating about a growing distance between her and William. Though the world saw smiles and handshakes, those who worked closest to the family knew the truth. William's warmth toward Camilla had always been lukewarm at best. During one pause in the proceedings, Camilla approached Catherine and Charlotte. Her voice was light, but there was an edge to it that couldn't be ignored. "Charlotte, you do know how important it is to keep your curtsy low when greeting your grandfather, don't you?" Camilla asked. "Yes, Your Majesty," Charlotte replied politely, though her tone lacked enthusiasm. "Good," Camilla said briskly, her eyes sweeping over Charlotte's posture as if she were inspecting an object rather than addressing a child. "We wouldn't want any little mistakes on such an important day, would we?" Catherine's eyes narrowed ever so slightly. She placed a protective hand on Charlotte's shoulder. "She's been practicing very hard," Catherine said, her voice calm but carrying a subtle warning. "I'm confident she'll make us all proud." Camilla's lips twitched in what might have been a smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. She turned and walked away without another word. It was in a quieter corner of the abbey later that morning, during a brief break, that Camilla let her guard down. Surrounded by her closest aides, she leaned in and muttered words that would later ignite a storm. "This whole thing feels haunted," Camilla reportedly said, her voice low but dripping with disdain. "No matter what we do, Diana's ghost still clings to this family. It's like she's lurking in every corner." She thought no one else was listening, but she was wrong. Charlotte had wandered closer, unseen, in search of her water bottle. She froze as the words reached her ears. For a moment, she didn't move, her young mind struggling to process what she had just heard. Diana's ghost. The words felt sharp and cold, twisting in her chest. Charlotte had always pictured her grandmother as a loving, warm presence, not some burdensome specter haunting the halls of the monarchy. Her eyes stung with tears, but she bit her lip hard, refusing to let them fall. She backed away quietly, retreating to Catherine's side. "Mummy," she whispered later, tugging gently at her mother's sleeve. "I don't like Queen Camilla. She said Granny Diana is a ghost that still haunts us." Catherine froze. The words sank in like stones, each one heavier than the last. Her initial reaction was disbelief, followed by a rush of protective anger. But she forced herself to stay composed for Charlotte's sake. "Darling, come here," Catherine said, crouching down to pull Charlotte into her arms. "You know your Granny Diana was a wonderful woman, don't you? She's not haunting anyone. She's watching over us, and she loves you very much." Charlotte nodded, sniffling quietly, but the hurt lingered in her eyes. By the time the family returned to their quarters later that evening, Catherine had relayed everything to William. He listened in silence at first, but Catherine could see his jaw tightening, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. "She said that? In front of Charlotte?" William asked finally, his voice low and dangerous. "Yes," Catherine replied, and Charlotte was devastated. William stood, pacing the room like a caged animal. Memories came flooding back. His mother's tearful face, the years of turmoil, and the public spectacle of his parents' marriage unraveling. Camilla's words reopened wounds he thought he had buried long ago. "She will never speak to my daughter again," William said finally, his voice like steel. The air in Adelaide Cottage was thick with silence. It was not the comfortable quiet of a home settling into the evening, but rather the heavy, electric calm that comes before a thunderstorm. William stood near the window, his hands clasped tightly behind his back, staring out at the dimly lit garden. He didn't speak. He didn't move. He barely breathed. Catherine watched him from across the room, her eyes soft with concern, yet lined with her own quiet fury. She had seen William angry before, but this was different. This was a deeper, colder anger, one that came from a place of profound hurt. Charlotte had gone to bed hours earlier, after a long talk with Catherine about what she'd overheard. The little princess had fought back tears bravely, insisting she was fine, but Catherine could tell the cruel remark had lodged itself deep in her daughter's heart. "She called Granny Diana a ghost," Charlotte had whispered, her voice trembling. Why would she say something so mean? Catherine had hugged her tightly, whispering reassurances, trying to patch over a wound that should never have been inflicted. But even as she soothed her daughter, she felt the weight of the insult herself. Now, hours later, Catherine broke the tense silence. "William," she said softly, walking towards him. "You can't let this sit. Not like this." He turned to face her, and in his eyes, she saw the storm she had feared. "She said that about my mother, Kate. In front of Charlotte. How do you come back from something like that?" His voice was low, but it vibrated with emotion. Catherine placed a hand on his arm. "We both know this isn't just about Charlotte. It's about everything that's been left unsaid for years." William looked away, exhaling sharply. Memories he had spent decades trying to suppress rose unbidden in his mind. The long nights listening to Diana cry behind closed doors, the way she had struggled to shield him and Harry from the pain of her fractured marriage, the way the world had watched her fall apart, while Camilla waited quietly in the wings. "I let her into this family," William said bitterly. "I tolerated her for my father's sake. I kept my distance and my mouth shut because it was the right thing to do. And this is how she repays that, by mocking my mother's memory in front of my daughter." His fists clenched at his sides. "She will never come near Charlotte or the boys again. Not as long as I live." Catherine didn't argue. She understood. This wasn't just anger, it was protection. William wasn't acting as a prince or a future king. He was acting as a father. The next morning, William's resolve had not softened. As he dressed in a sharp navy suit for an early meeting, he instructed his private secretary to prepare a call with his father. "Tell His Majesty I need 5 minutes. It's urgent." King Charles answered quickly, his voice warm but wary. "William, what's the matter? You sound tense." William didn't waste time. "It's about Camilla." There was a pause on the line. "What about her?" Charles asked carefully. "She made an appalling remark during rehearsals yesterday." Charlotte overheard it. She said, and I quote, "Diana's just a ghost that still haunts this family." Charles inhaled sharply. "Are you sure she said that?" "Charlotte repeated it to Kate last night," William replied firmly. "She was upset, and understandably so." Another long pause. "William," Charles began, his tone measured. I'm sure Camilla didn't mean it the way it sounded. You know she has a tendency to speak without thinking at times. This isn't about her intent, William cut in sharply. This is about the fact that my daughter heard those words. She doesn't deserve to be dragged into old wounds and ancient resentments. I understand your anger, but— No, Father, William interrupted. You don't. I've made my decision. Camilla is not to have any contact with my children from this point on. She will not attend family gatherings where they're present. She will not speak to them, and she will not be part of their lives. Charles's voice hardened. William, that is not your decision to make alone. Camilla is my wife. She is queen consort. And Charlotte is my daughter, William replied coldly. As her father, it is my job to protect her. I failed to protect my mother. I won't fail to protect my children. The line went silent. For a moment, it seemed Charles might argue further. But he didn't. I see, the king said finally, his voice heavy with resignation. If that's how you feel, I won't force the issue. It's not about how I feel, William said. It's about what's right. After ending the call, William sat in silence for a long time. He knew the decision would ignite controversy, both inside and outside the palace. But he didn't care. His duty to the crown came second to his duty as a father. And in his mind, there was no room for compromise. That afternoon, Camilla received the news through an intermediary. The queen consort was livid. To be banned from seeing William's children, to be treated as though she were some sort of threat, was, in her eyes, an insult of the highest order. She's punishing me for Diana, Camilla fumed to her private secretary. That woman has been gone for over 2 decades, and still she overshadows everything. But no matter how much she raged, there was nothing she could do. The line had been drawn, and for the first time in years, the House of Windsor found itself on the brink of open war. The next morning, Catherine awoke early, but sleep still clung to her in restless fragments. She hadn't truly rested since Charlotte's tearful confession. The image of her daughter's wounded little face replayed in her mind over and over, each time igniting a fierce, protective instinct deep in her chest. She rose from the bed quietly, not wanting to disturb William, though she could tell by the way his brow furrowed, even in sleep, that he wasn't truly at peace either. For years, she had seen him wrestle with the scars left by his childhood, the public disintegration of his parents' marriage, the constant media intrusion, and the loss of his mother in a way that would have destroyed a lesser man. William had grown into a strong and principled leader, but in moments like this, she glimpsed the boy who had once watched helplessly as his world shattered. Catherine pulled her robe tighter around her as she made her way down the hall to Charlotte's room. She found her daughter sitting cross-legged on her bed, already dressed in a soft cardigan and skirt, brushing her doll's hair. But there was no lightness in her movements. "Good morning, darling," Catherine said gently, sitting beside her. "Morning, Mummy," Charlotte replied quietly, keeping her eyes fixed on the doll. Catherine reached out and touched her daughter's cheek, tilting her face upward. "How are you feeling today?" Charlotte hesitated. "Better, but it still makes me sad when I think about what she said." Catherine felt her chest tighten. "I know, sweetheart, and you were very brave to tell me. What Queen Camilla said was unkind and untrue. Your Granny Diana loved people so much, and she would have loved you more than anything in the world." Charlotte nodded, her lips pressing into a thin line as if she were trying to keep more tears at bay. "I don't want to see her again," Charlotte whispered. Catherine smoothed back her hair, her voice steady. "You won't have to, my love. Papa and I will make sure of it." As she left Charlotte's room, Catherine felt her sorrow hardening into resolve. She had spent years navigating the complex dynamics of the royal family, learning when to speak and when to remain silent. But this was different. This wasn't about protocol, tradition, or public perception. This was about her child. When Catherine entered the study, she found William already awake, dressed, and reviewing documents with a grim focus. "She's still upset," Catherine said softly, coming to stand beside him. William looked up, his expression taut. "So am I." Catherine placed a hand on his shoulder. "William, you know I don't interfere when it comes to your family matters. But this time, I can't stay quiet." He turned his chair to face her, his eyes dark with emotion. "I don't want you to stay quiet. You're her mother. You feel this just as much as I do." "I do," Catherine said firmly. "Charlotte is still so young, but she understands more than we realize. And now she's been made to feel as though her grandmother's memory is something shameful, something to mock. I won't allow it. William nodded, his jaw tight. Neither will I. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of their shared anger binding them together. Finally, Catherine spoke again. I don't care about titles or crowns or traditions. As a mother, I can't forgive her for this. Camilla crossed a line, and if we don't draw boundaries now, she'll think she can get away with anything. You're right, William said quietly. And I've already drawn that line. Catherine met his gaze, searching his face for any sign of hesitation. But there was none. I told Father last night. Camilla is no longer welcome near our children. She won't attend their birthdays, their Christmases, nothing. As far as Charlotte, George, and Louis are concerned, she's a stranger now. Catherine felt a surge of relief mixed with lingering anger. You did the right thing. I'll stand by you completely. Whatever happens next, we face it together. William reached for her hand, gripping it tightly. Thank you. I don't know what's coming, Kate. But I do know this. I refuse to let history repeat itself. Not with our children. Outside the palace walls, the public remained unaware of the storm brewing within. But within those gilded corridors, the stage was set for a family conflict that could not be easily contained. And Catherine, usually the picture of calm diplomacy, was ready to fight for her daughter's dignity with all the quiet ferocity of a mother protecting her young. William had always been a man who measured his words carefully. Years of public scrutiny had taught him the art of restraint, of keeping his emotions locked tightly behind a stoic expression even as camera lenses and flashing lights searched for cracks in his armor. But that morning, after hearing Catherine's account of Charlotte's heartbreak and replaying in his mind the cruel words Camilla had uttered, the carefully built walls around his emotions began to splinter. He sat alone in the study of Adelaide Cottage, the pale light of dawn creeping across his desk. In his hands he held a photograph of Diana, one of his favorites. She was laughing, her head tilted back slightly, her eyes bright with life. He remembered the day it was taken. They had been on holiday in France, and she had been trying to teach him and Harry how to use disposable cameras. For a brief moment, the memory brought a smile to his face, but it vanished as quickly as it came. Now, decades later, the boy in that photo had grown into a man tasked with protecting his own family from the same sort of anguish that had haunted his childhood. Not again, he muttered under his breath, his voice cracking with suppressed emotion. The sound of footsteps in the hall pulled him back to the present. Catherine appeared in the doorway, her expression soft but determined. William, she said gently, you can't keep this bottled up. We need to talk about what's next. He placed the photo down carefully, as though handling something fragile. There's nothing to discuss. I've already made my decision. You mean cutting her off entirely? Catherine asked, stepping into the room. Yes. His voice was flat, but his eyes burned with a quiet intensity. I don't care if it creates a rift. I don't care if the press finds out. I will not allow that woman to be anywhere near our children again. Catherine moved closer, placing a hand on his shoulder. I know you're angry. So am I. But this isn't just anger, is it? It's something deeper. William's hands clenched into fists on the desk. You're right. It's more than anger. It's years of pain. Years of watching my mother suffer in silence while the world judged her and protected the people who hurt her. I was too young to do anything then, but I'm not a boy anymore. He stood abruptly, pacing the room like a caged animal. I saw what it did to her, Kate. The coldness, the whispers behind her back, the way she was made to feel like an outsider in her own family. And now Camilla dares to speak of her like she's some ghost haunting the family? In front of my daughter. His voice rose, sharp with raw emotion. No, I won't allow it. I won't let Charlotte or George or Louis grow up feeling the same hurt Harry and I felt. Camilla crossed a line, and there's no coming back from that. Catherine listened quietly, her own heart heavy. She had known from the start that William's relationship with Camilla was fraught, built on decades of unresolved resentment and uneasy tolerance. She had always admired his ability to remain civil for the sake of his father and the monarchy, but she could see now that civility had its limits. What about your father? She asked carefully. This will put him in a terrible position. I know, William said, his voice softening slightly. And I don't want to hurt him. But I have to think about my children first. My loyalty to them comes before anything else. There was a knock at the door. William's private secretary appeared, looking slightly nervous. Your Royal Highness, King Charles is on the line. He wishes to speak with you. William exchanged a glance with Catherine. I'll take it in here. As the door closed, he picked up the phone and braced himself. William, Charles began, his tone strained. I understand you've had a disagreement with Camilla. That's one way of putting it, William replied coldly. I know she can be blunt at times, Charles said cautiously. But surely this isn't worth cutting her out of the family entirely. She made my daughter cry, William snapped. She mocked the memory of my mother in front of Charlotte. Do you understand how damaging that is? How dare she? Charles sighed heavily. I understand your anger. But Camilla is my wife. She deserves some measure of respect. She lost that right the moment she insulted my mother to my child, William said, his voice like ice. I won't discuss this further. Camilla is not to come near my children. That's final. William, please, Charles pleaded. This family has already been through so much division. Don't add to it. I'm not adding to anything, William replied. I'm protecting my family. And if you can't see why that's necessary, then maybe you're more blinded by loyalty than I thought. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Finally, Charles spoke, his voice weary. Very well. If that's your decision, I won't press it. But know this, there will be consequences. William didn't flinch. Let them come. As he set down the phone, Catherine moved to his side, her hand slipping into his. You did what you had to do, she said softly. I know, William replied. But somehow, it doesn't feel like enough. Together they stood in silence, both aware that the repercussions of this moment would echo through the royal family for years to come. The royal family had always been adept at projecting an image of unity, no matter how turbulent the waters beneath the surface. But in the days following William's decision to cut off Camilla from his children's lives, cracks began to appear that even the palace's most seasoned handlers couldn't disguise. Whispers of the confrontation between father and son spread quickly among the staff, carried in hushed tones through the long corridors of Buckingham Palace and Kensington. Even in a household trained in discretion, this particular breach felt seismic. At Clarence House, Camilla was furious. She stormed through her private quarters, her voice sharp and cold as she vented to her closest aides. How dare he, she spat, her fingers gripping the edge of a polished mahogany table. Does he not realize who I am? I am the queen consort. He has no right to dictate who I see, let alone ban me from my grandchildren. Her private secretary tried to soothe her, but Camilla was in no mood for platitudes. This is Diana's doing, she hissed. Even in death, she clings to this family like a wretched ghost. And William has let her memory poison his judgment. Meanwhile, across London at Buckingham Palace, King Charles found himself in an impossible position. As monarch, he was expected to remain above personal squabbles, to embody the stability of the crown. But as a husband and father, he felt torn between two worlds. Your Majesty, one of his senior advisors said cautiously, if this matter becomes public, the damage to the monarchy's image could be considerable. Charles rubbed his temples wearily. You don't think I know that? Perhaps, the advisor ventured. It would be wise to issue a joint statement. Something to assure the public there is no rift. Charles shook his head. No, William won't agree to that. Not now. He's too angry. And frankly, I can't say I blame him. The advisor hesitated. Then what shall we do? Charles sighed. For now, we wait. We give this time to cool before deciding on a course of action. But time did little to soothe the tension. At Adelaide Cottage, William and Catherine tried to maintain a sense of normalcy for their children. George, Louis, and Charlotte were kept busy with lessons and playtime in the garden. But even in their sanctuary, the undercurrent of strain was impossible to ignore. Papa, Charlotte asked one afternoon, her voice small, does this mean I'll never have to see Queen Camilla again? William knelt before her, meeting her gaze with calm determination. That's right, darling, he said gently. You won't have to see her again. Mummy and I will make sure of it. Good, Charlotte murmured, hugging her father tightly. But even as he reassured her, William couldn't help but feel the weight of what his decision meant for the family at large. Harry, though thousands of miles away in California, soon caught wind of the conflict. According to palace insiders, he was surprised but not unsympathetic. I can't say I didn't see this coming, Harry reportedly told a friend. Williams kept a lid on his feelings for years. But for Charlotte to hear something like that, I'd have done the same. Yet some within the family were less supportive. Princess, and, ever the pragmatist, privately criticized William's choice. He's acting rashly, she was overheard saying. Family grievances must never come before duty. This isn't how the firm survives. Even Prince Edward, usually a quiet and conciliatory presence, expressed concern about the potential fallout. But William remained unmoved. This isn't about the firm, he told Catherine late one night. This is about protecting our children. I won't let anyone, not even Camilla, plant seeds of bitterness in their hearts. Catherine nodded, her hand resting on his arm. And you're right. Whatever happens, we'll face it together. But deep down, they both knew the battle lines had been drawn. For the first time in decades, the royal family was teetering on the edge of a division that could not easily be mended. And this time, the world was watching closely. For years, there had been an unspoken understanding between William and Camilla, an invisible contract delicately crafted in the shadows of grief, obligation, and royal necessity. It was not forged from affection, nor from any genuine desire for reconciliation, but from the recognition that the monarchy could not afford more fractures. On the surface, they maintained civility. In public, they exchanged polite smiles and cordial greetings, each playing their part to uphold the fragile illusion of family harmony. But beneath the surface, the truth simmered like embers waiting for a gust of wind to set them ablaze. That gust had come in the form of Charlotte's tears and Camilla's thoughtless words. For William, the invisible contract had shattered the moment he heard his daughter's trembling voice recount what she had overheard. All those years of holding back, of swallowing his resentment for the sake of appearances, had come undone in an instant. At Kensington Palace, aides whispered nervously about the storm raging behind closed doors. William's private secretary, a man who had seen his share of royal disputes, confided in a colleague that this was unlike anything he had witnessed before. "This isn't just a disagreement," he murmured. "This is decades of unresolved pain exploding all at once." William has reached his breaking point. In many ways, the fragility of William and Camilla's relationship could be traced back to Diana. For William, Diana was not merely his mother. She was his moral compass, his protector, and the one person who had understood him fully in the midst of the royal machine. Losing her at such a young age had left wounds that never truly healed. Camilla, in contrast, represented the opposite. To William, she was a living reminder of everything his mother had suffered. The whispered phone calls, the humiliation in the tabloids, the lonely nights when Diana's sobs echoed through Kensington Palace. Even after Camilla's marriage to his father, William had never been able to reconcile the woman he saw as a source of his mother's pain with the role she now played as queen consort. For years, he had tolerated her presence out of duty. At family gatherings, he shook her hand and exchanged small talk. During official events, he stood beside her in photographs, never allowing a flicker of his true feelings to surface. It was a delicate dance, a performance perfected over decades. But now, with one careless remark, Camilla had undone all of it. William's decision to ban her from seeing his children sent shockwaves through the royal household. Some staff applauded his firmness, viewing it as the protective instinct of a devoted father. Others feared the implications, worried that this breach might irreparably damage the already tenuous bonds within the family. King Charles, meanwhile, was caught in an impossible position. For years, he had leaned on Camilla for emotional support, relying on her quiet counsel and steadfast loyalty as he prepared for his role as monarch. To hear William speak of her with such coldness cut deeply. "He doesn't understand," Charles confided to a close friend during a private meeting at Balmoral. "He doesn't see how hard Camilla has tried to make amends. She was never trying to replace Diana. She simply wanted to find her place in this family." But for William, there was no making amends. One evening, as he sat with Catherine in the quiet of Adelaide Cottage, he spoke the words that had been simmering within him for years. "I've been pretending for so long," he admitted. "Pretending that I could forgive her. Pretending that I could see her as anything other than the woman who helped destroy my mother's happiness. But I can't, Kate. Not anymore. Not after what she said to Charlotte." Catherine took his hand gently. "You don't have to pretend anymore. You've done more than enough to keep the peace. But this isn't just about the past. It's about the future, about protecting our children from the same pain you endured. William nodded, his eyes clouded with emotion. I don't want them growing up in a house full of resentment and secrets. I want them to feel safe, to know that we'll always stand up for them. Then you're doing the right thing, Catherine said softly, no matter what anyone else thinks. But as the days passed, it became clear that not everyone agreed. Princess Anne, the no-nonsense royal known for her bluntness, was said to have expressed her displeasure during a private lunch with Charles. William's allowing his emotions to dictate his actions, she said. The monarchy has survived for centuries because we keep personal grievances out of the public eye. If he continues down this path, he risks tearing the family apart. Prince Edward was more cautious in his response, but admitted to an aide. This is dangerous territory. If William and Camilla can't find a way forward, the repercussions could last for generations. Even so, William remained unmoved. This isn't about the monarchy, he told Catherine one night. This is about our family, and I won't sacrifice our children's well-being for the sake of keeping up appearances. At Clarence's house, Camilla's fury had cooled into icy resolve. To her confidants, she made no secret of her feelings. He's punishing me for sins I've already paid for, she said. I've been over backwards to be accepted by those boys, and this is how he repays me? It's disgraceful. But privately, even Camilla knew the damage had been done. The invisible contract that had kept their relationship from crumbling entirely was gone, replaced by a chasm too wide to bridge. For the first time since her marriage to Charles, Camilla felt truly unwelcome in her husband's family. And as word of the rift began to trickle beyond palace walls, the public's curiosity grew insatiable. Was this simply a private family matter, or was it the beginning of a royal fracture that could not be repaired? Inside the House of Windsor, the answer remained painfully unclear. The decision was not made lightly, though to outsiders it might have seemed like a rash and emotional reaction. For William, however, the moment Charlotte confided in him about Camilla's cruel remark felt like the culmination of years of quiet tolerance and simmering resentment. He had tried to maintain a facade of civility for the sake of the monarchy, for his father, and even for the public, who demanded a vision of a united royal family. But the words, "Diana's just a ghost that still haunts this family," shattered any remaining patience he had for pretense. It was early evening when William summoned his most trusted advisors to Adelaide Cottage. The room was dimly lit, the weight of history hanging over them like a suffocating curtain. Catherine sat beside him, her posture calm, but her expression betraying a quiet determination. "I want this handled delicately," William began, his tone steady but edged with steel. "But let me be perfectly clear. Camilla is no longer to have contact with my children. No phone calls, no letters, no invitations to events where George, Charlotte, or Louis will be present. From this point on, she is a stranger to them." The advisors shifted uneasily in their seats. One of them, a seasoned palace aide who had weathered many royal storms, cleared his throat nervously. "Your Royal Highness, this is a significant step. It may create repercussions, both within the family and in the eyes of the public." "I understand," William replied sharply. "But my duty as a father outweighs any obligation to appearances. This is non-negotiable." Catherine placed a hand gently on William's arm, reinforcing his resolve with her quiet support. "Charlotte is still hurting," she added softly. "And as her parents, it's our responsibility to shield her from anyone who would diminish the memory of the grandmother she never had the chance to know." The advisors nodded, though their unease was palpable. They knew that communicating this decision to King Charles would be delicate, if not dangerous. That evening, William drafted a private letter to his father. It was not an emotional outburst, but a carefully measured explanation of his position. "Father, it is with a heavy heart that I write this. You know I have tried, for years, to keep the peace and to accept Camilla's presence in this family despite the deep pain tied to her history with us. But after her recent comment about my mother, overheard by Charlotte, I can no longer allow her near my children." The remark was not only cruel but profoundly disrespectful to the memory of a woman who still means everything to Harry and me. "Please understand this is not about you or your marriage. It is about protecting my children from emotional harm. I hope you will respect my decision even if you cannot agree with it. William." The next morning, The letter was hand-delivered to Charles at Clarence's house. When he read the words, Charles's hands trembled slightly. He closed his eyes, letting out a long, weary sigh. For all his efforts to unite his family under one crown, this moment felt like a splintering blow. Camilla, on the other hand, did not take the news quietly. When Charles informed her of William's decision, her face flushed with indignation. "So that's it," she demanded. "After everything I've done to integrate myself into this family, I'm to be treated like an outsider? Like some sort of villain?" Charles tried to soothe her, but Camilla's anger only deepened. "He's still clinging to Diana's ghost," she spat. "No matter what I do, I'll never be good enough for those boys." Back at Adelaide Cottage, Catherine and William spoke in hushed tones about what they anticipated would come next. "This won't stay private for long," Catherine said. "Once the staff knows, it's only a matter of time before the press catches wind of it." "I know," William replied, running a hand through his hair. "But we'll deal with that when it comes. Right now, my only concern is Charlotte. She needs to see that we're standing up for her, that we'll always protect her." That weekend, the family gathered in the garden for a picnic. Charlotte seemed lighter somehow, as though a burden had been lifted from her young shoulders. She laughed with George and Louis, her eyes sparkling once more. William watched her from a distance, feeling a deep sense of peace. "I think she knows," Catherine said softly, coming to stand beside him. "Knows what?" "That we've chosen her. That we're on her side." William nodded. "And I'll choose her again and again, no matter the cost." But even as he spoke, he knew the cost might soon become all too real. Across the palace walls, lines were being drawn. Allies were picking sides, and the British press, always hungry for a royal scandal, was beginning to stir. It was only a matter of time before this private family rift exploded onto the world stage. Camilla had endured decades of public scorn, tabloid ridicule, and whispered judgments in drawing rooms from Windsor to Westminster. She had survived it all. The brutal third person in the marriage headlines, the cold stares from Diana's loyalists, and even the initial disapproval of William and Harry when she married Charles. Yet none of those battles compared to the fury she felt now. It wasn't the banishment itself that stung the most. It was the way it had been delivered, not with a direct conversation, not even with an ounce of acknowledgement for the years she had spent trying to repair her place in the royal family. No, it came in the form of a tightly written letter from William, hand-delivered by an aide with averted eyes. The words kept replaying in her mind, each line scratching deeper into her pride. "You are no longer welcome in my children's lives. From this point forward, they are not to be in your company, nor will they attend any engagements where you are present." Camilla crumpled the letter in her hands and tossed it across the room, her breathing sharp and shallow. "How dare he?" she hissed to no one in particular, pacing the length of her private sitting room in Clarence's house. "How dare that boy speak to me like this after everything I've done for this family?" Her closest aide, a woman who had loyally served her for years, sat cautiously on the edge of a chair. "Your Majesty," she began carefully. "Perhaps the Prince of Wales simply needs time to cool his temper." "Time?" Camilla snapped, spinning around. "He's had over 20 years. 20 years to let go of his mother's ghost and see me for who I really am. And yet here we are. To him, I'm still nothing more than the woman who ruined his perfect fairy tale." She crossed to the window, staring out at the immaculate gardens below. Camilla prided herself on having carved out her place in the royal hierarchy. It hadn't been easy, but over the years, she'd earned grudging respect from courtiers and even, she believed, a wary tolerance from William. Or so she had thought. Now, with one move, he had stripped all of that away. Charles entered quietly, his face lined with fatigue. He had been dealing with his son's cold determination on one side and his wife's smoldering rage on the other. "Camilla," he said gently, "we need to talk." Her head snapped toward him, her eyes flashing. "Oh, I think we're well past talking, don't you?" "Please," Charles said, stepping closer. William's reaction was harsh, but he's acting out of pain. "You know how much Diana's memory still affects him." Camilla let out a bitter laugh. "Don't I just? Diana this, Diana that. I could cure cancer, and it still wouldn't matter. She'd always be the saint, and I'd always be the villain." Charles reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "I've been nothing but gracious to those children," Camilla continued, her voice rising. "I never tried to replace their precious mother. I've kept my distance. I've respected their space, and this is my reward. It's not a reward or a punishment, Charles said softly. It's about Charlotte. She's young and impressionable, and your words, they hurt her. Camilla's jaw tightened. I made one offhand remark. One. And now I'm banished like some common outcast. Charles exhaled heavily. William feels he's protecting his daughter. As much as it pains me to say, perhaps it's best if you give them space for now. Camilla's face hardened. Space? Or are you asking me to grovel for forgiveness like some servant? Of course not, Charles replied quickly. But if we escalate this, if it spills into the press, the monarchy's image will suffer. We need to tread carefully. Let him be careful, Camilla spat. I'm done walking on eggshells for that boy. The tension between them hung heavy in the room. For the first time since their marriage, a fissure had formed between Charles and Camilla, subtle but undeniable. Across town at Kensington Palace, William and Catherine were unaware of Camilla's mounting fury. But their private secretary had already warned them. She won't take this lying down. William's response was calm but unyielding. She can rage all she wants, he said. As far as my children are concerned, she doesn't exist. But deep down, even he knew Camilla was not a woman to be underestimated. She had weathered public scandals before. If she decided to strike back, the fallout could be catastrophic, not just for William and Catherine, but for the entire House of Windsor. And in Clarence's house, Camilla was already plotting her next move. It began with a single whispered leak to a tabloid journalist, the sort of carefully worded tip that always seemed to find its way into the right hands at the right moment. Within hours, the British media had their teeth sunk into the story, and what had been a private family matter burst into public view with explosive force. The headlines were merciless. Prince William bans Camilla from seeing his children. Royal family torn apart as Queen consort clashes with Wales household. Diana's legacy still looms. Charlotte at the center of royal firestorm. At first, Kensington Palace declined to comment, releasing only a terse statement. We do not respond to speculation about private family matters. But in the age of social media, silence was its own answer. Twitter and Instagram erupted. Supporters of Diana hailed William as a hero, a devoted son and father standing up for his mother's memory and his daughter's emotional well-being. Finally, William showing he has a spine, protecting his kids like Diana would have wanted. Hashtag Team Charlotte, hashtag Justice for Diana. Others, however, sided with Camilla, accusing William of pettiness and suggesting he was dragging ancient wounds into the present. Camilla's been part of the family for decades now. How long must she keep paying for the past? This isn't fair. Hashtag Queen Camilla. The divide was deep, and it cut through every layer of public opinion. Television talk shows debated it endlessly. Pundits and royal commentators traded barbed opinions in glossy magazines. Even late-night comedians weighed in, joking about ghosts haunting the firm. Inside Clarence's house, Camilla seethed as she watched the coverage. This is exactly what he wanted, she muttered bitterly to her private secretary. To humiliate me. To make me the villain all over again. Her aides urged her to stay quiet, to let the storm pass. But Camilla, emboldened by years of surviving public backlash, considered a different strategy. What if I told my side, she said one evening. What if I let the world see the real William? Not the golden boy they worship, but the cold, calculating man who's weaponizing his mother's memory to control this family. Charles, however, was adamant. No, he told her firmly. There will be no interviews, no statements. Not now. If we feed this fire, it will consume all of us. But even Charles couldn't stop the trickle of gossip seeping from palace walls. Anonymous friends of Camilla began speaking to the press, painting her as a misunderstood step-grandmother who had been trying for years to forge a bond with William's children. She's heartbroken, one source told a leading newspaper. All Camilla ever wanted was to be accepted as part of the family. But William has never forgiven her for the past. Across town, at Kensington Palace, William watched the media storm unfold with a grim sense of inevitability. They'll twist this however they want, he told Catherine. But I know the truth. And so does Charlotte. Catherine nodded, her hand resting on his. You've done what's right for our family. That's all that matters. Still, the couple couldn't ignore the growing pressure from within the firm. Princess and reportedly sent William a terse message, urging him to stop this nonsense before it becomes irreversible. Duty above all else. And's message read. That's how the monarchy survives. Even Edward weighed in, cautiously suggesting that William and Camilla meet privately to find a path forward. But William refused. This isn't about duty, he told Catherine one night. This is about protecting our children from a toxic influence. I won't compromise on that. Meanwhile, palace staff scrambled to manage the fallout. Leaks about Charlotte's distress began surfacing. How she cried in her mother's arms. How she asked if Granny Diana would be upset about what Queen Camilla had said. Those details only fanned the flames. She's just a child, one commentator said on a morning news show. If Camilla really made such a cruel remark, then William is absolutely right to shield her. But others questioned the wisdom of William's decision. Isn't this just history repeating itself? Another pundit asked. A family torn apart by resentment and miscommunication? As the days turned into weeks, the rift deepened. For William and Catherine, the priority remained their children. They limited media access, cut down on public appearances, and focused on giving George, Charlotte, and Louis a sense of normalcy amid the chaos. At Clarence House, however, Camilla grew increasingly isolated. Even Charles, torn between his love for his wife and his role as father and monarch, began withdrawing emotionally. I feel like I'm fighting this battle alone, Camilla confided to a close friend. No matter what I do, Diana's shadow will always win. But privately, she began plotting her next move. If she couldn't win over William and Catherine, perhaps she could appeal directly to public sympathy. And with every passing day, the House of Windsor edged closer to a full-blown crisis. One that threatened not only family relationships, but the very fabric of the monarchy itself. King Charles had never been more aware of the weight of the crown than in those tense weeks after the rift between William and Camilla burst into public view. The monarchy, which he had spent his life preparing to lead, was teetering on the edge of a very modern crisis. A family feud bleeding into headlines, threatening to eclipse even his long-awaited coronation. At first, Charles had tried to keep his emotions in check. As monarch, he was expected to rise above personal grievances. But as a father and husband, he felt pulled in two directions. On one side was Camilla, his steadfast companion for decades, the woman he had fought so hard to legitimize in the eyes of the public and his family. On the other was William, his eldest son, whose loyalty to Diana's memory and protectiveness over his children had hardened into an unmovable wall. Your Majesty, the press are turning this into a morality play, one senior advisor warned during a late-night strategy session at Buckingham Palace. Queen Camilla cast as the villain, William as the protective father, and Diana's memory haunting the narrative like a saint. We need to control the story before it controls us. Charles rubbed his temples, exhaustion lining his face. How do you propose I do that? My son won't return my calls, and my wife is too furious to even consider an apology. The advisor hesitated. Perhaps it's time for a direct approach. You need to get them in the same room. And so began Charles's attempt at reconciliation. He reached out first to William, calling him directly one quiet evening as the younger man sat in his study at Adelaide Cottage. William, Charles began, his voice strained. Please, I know you're angry, but we need to talk. Face to face. No aides, no cameras. Just family. William hesitated before answering. Father, I don't see what good it will do. My decision stands. I'm not asking you to reverse your decision, Charles said quickly. I'm asking you to give me a chance to explain, to find some common ground. For the sake of the family, for the sake of the crown. There was a long pause. Finally, William replied, Fine, but Catherine comes with me. Of course, Charles agreed. And Camilla will be there too. She deserves to have her say. When William hung up, he turned to Catherine, his expression unreadable. This is going to be a disaster. Catherine placed a steady hand on his. Then let's make sure we don't add fuel to the fire. Go and calm, but don't back down. 2 days later, the meeting took place in the private drawing room of Clarence House. The atmosphere was frosty from the moment William and Catherine arrived. Camilla sat stiffly in her armchair, her lips pressed into a thin line. Charles stood near the fireplace, visibly anxious. William, thank you for coming, Charles began, gesturing for them to sit. William remained standing. I won't take long. Say what you need to say, Father. Camilla's eyes flashed with irritation, but Charles raised a hand, urging her to remain silent. I understand why you're upset, Charles said carefully. I understand why Charlotte's feelings must come first. But cutting Camilla out completely. William, this isn't sustainable. It creates a fracture that the public will sense. And it places me in an impossible position. With respect, Father, William said sharply. This isn't about the public. It's about my family. My daughter heard Camilla insult her grandmother's memory. She cried herself to sleep that night. Do you have any idea what that did to her? Of course I do, Charles said, his voice rising slightly. But don't you see? You're allowing the past to dictate the future. Diana's memory. Don't speak about her like you understand. William cut in coldly. You didn't protect her then. I won't make the same mistake with my children. Camilla, unable to hold her tongue any longer, snapped. For heaven's sake. William, I've tried for years to make peace with you. I've never sought to replace Diana. But you cling to her memory like it's a weapon. You insulted her memory, William shot back. That's not peace. That's poison. Catherine's hand touched his arm lightly. William, she murmured, urging him to stay calm. Charles stepped forward, his voice breaking slightly. Please, both of you. I can't bear to see the family torn apart like this. Camilla, perhaps an apology. I will not apologize for speaking the truth, Camilla said firmly. Then there's nothing more to discuss, William said, his voice like ice. He turned to leave. William, wait, Charles pleaded. If not for me, then for the crown. Think of the monarchy. I'm thinking of my children, William said without looking back. The crown can't heal their hearts. But I can. And with that, he and Catherine walked out, leaving Charles and Camilla in stunned silence. As the heavy door closed, Camilla sank back into her chair, her face pale. Charles stood motionless, feeling the weight of a family unraveling in his hands. For the first time, he wondered if even the crown was strong enough to hold them together.